Humans have existed for millions of years, but even with all our survival instincts and growing intelligence, we were never alone at the top. Long before cities rose and technology bloomed, our ancestors lived side by side with creatures so dangerous, so enormous, that survival often came down to a lucky moment or a single misstep. It's easy to look at the animal kingdom today and think we've seen the worst of lions, sharks, maybe even the occasional polar bear. But what if I told you that the most terrifying predators we've ever known still exist, lurking in waters we continue to share, and worse, their ancestors were even deadlier? That's not exaggeration, that's fossil fact. Imagine a time when early humans stepped cautiously along the banks of deep African lakes, needing water to live, but knowing those same waters might hide the thing that ends them. In that murky stillness, sometimes silent, sometimes rippling with deceit, lived giants, real monsters. Crocodiles, not the ones we know today, not the ones you spot in zoos or documentaries, but ones that could swallow a man whole and leave nothing behind. These weren't exaggerated beasts from myth or old tales. They were real, breathing, flesh-ripping predators. And one of them, the most terrifying of them all, was Crocodylus thorbjarnasoni. Discovered only recently after being forgotten for over 1 million years, this beast was no ordinary reptile. Its skull was so large that paleontologists couldn't even compare it to modern Crocodylus, it just didn't fit. And when they tried to estimate its size, they realized this creature likely grew up to 25 feet long, with a possibility of some individuals exceeding even that. 2.5 tons of raw, armored, ambush perfection. Bigger than a hippo, stronger than a polar bear, and capable of vanishing into a river with barely a ripple. That's the kind of apex predator we're talking about. And yes, it lived exactly where early humans did. Subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals if stories like these fascinate you, because we're only getting started. Now, you might wonder, if these things hunted humans, where are the bones? Where's the evidence? That's the horrifying part. We haven't found many, if any, human remains with bite marks from Crocodylus thorbjarnasoni, but that's not because it didn't eat us. In fact, researchers believe it was so big and powerful, so ruthlessly efficient, that it often swallowed humans whole. Nothing left to fossilize, no scratches on bone, no skeletons to study, just gone. Think of it like a modern-day saltwater crocodile grabbing a French bulldog now. Replace the dog with your average early human. You get the picture. The silence in the fossil record isn't peace, it's a scream that was never heard. Even so, the waters of ancient Africa weren't ruled by a single beast. No, there were others, just as deadly, just as specialized. As Crocodylus thorbjarnasoni faded out, another killer rose. Its name? Crocodylus, anthropophagus. And if that name sounds personal, it is. Anthropophagus literally means human eater. This wasn't speculation, it was named based on what it did to us. Unlike its cousin, this croc left bite marks behind. Clean, chilling, unmistakable punctures found on the bones of Homo habilis or ancient relatives. In one case, the leg bones of a young hominin were found snapped, torn, and chewed. And even worse, it seems in that very moment of terror, another predator joined in, a big cat, maybe a saber-tooth. Talk about bad luck. But the point is, this croc didn't just coexist with humans, it hunted them, directly, repeatedly, leaving behind a fossil trail of violence. What's even more disturbing is the pattern that emerged. Fossils only show croc bite marks from animals of a certain size, never the truly massive ones. Why? Because once crocodiles grew big enough, they left no trace. Just like their cousin, the thorbjarnasoni, these monsters got so huge that evidence of their attacks vanished. The victims never fossilized. They vanished into the belly of the beast. At this point, you might be thinking, surely this was just limited to one region, right? Maybe a local threat, not a global one. But the more we dig, the more we realize how widespread this terror might have been. Fossils from both of these crocodiles were found in East Africa, particularly around ancient lakes like Lake Tana. These areas weren't just popular with crocodiles, they were crucial for humans. They offered water, food, fish, fertile land. They were irresistible and deadly. Imagine trying to fill your jug at the edge of a lake, knowing full well something under that dark surface might launch itself at you without warning. That was life. Still, not every massive crocodile in the area was a man-eater. At least not all were built for it. One such creature was Rimasuchus, another giant, potentially as long or even longer than thorbjarnasoni. But there was a twist. Rimasuchus had an unusually narrow, elongated snout more like a fish catcher than a flesh ripper. Its teeth were slender, pointed, better for gripping slick prey than crushing bones. It might have looked terrifying, but compared to the horned, thick-jawed killers that came before, it may have been less of a threat to humans and more of a river giant that minded its own business. Though, let's be honest, would you really want to be the one to test that theory? What's clear in all this is that the water was never safe, and the predators in it weren't just lurking, they were adapting, growing, vanishing, evolving again. The crocodiles we share the planet with today are direct descendants of those giants. They're smaller, yes, but still the most lethal predator to humans when you remove things like poison and disease. They kill more people annually than sharks, lions, and bears combined, and they do it silently, without drama, without warning. The relationship between humans and crocodiles hasn't ended, it's just taken a slightly smaller form. And if you're enjoying this dive into a forgotten terror, make sure to subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals so you never miss the next ancient nightmare waiting to resurface. But if you thought the worst was over, think again. Because those two apex crocs weren't just physically monstrous, they were visually intimidating as well. Unlike most crocodiles we know today, Crocodylus thorbjarnasoni and Crocodylus anthropophagus had something no modern reptile should ever need: horns. Yes, horns. On Thorbjarnasoni, these features sat above the eyes, raised bony ridges that made the animal look like it wore a natural helmet. Not decorative, not playful. These were intimidation, tools and evolutionary "don't mess with me" sign broadcast to every creature, including us. They may have served a purpose in mating displays or territorial fights, but to a trembling hominin hiding in the brush, they probably just made the monster in the water look more demonic. Anthropophagus, however, took it even further. Its horns were more pronounced, situated above the ears instead of the eyes, giving it a crown-like silhouette unlike anything seen before or since. Fossil records suggest that males of the species had especially prominent versions of these horns, likely used to increase their perceived size during combat or to impress mates. Whatever their function, they made the creature look horrifyingly unique. It wasn't enough that it could drag you into the water and kill you in seconds, it had to look like a nightmare while doing it. And these creatures weren't picky eaters. Like their modern cousins, they were generalist predators. If it moved and fit in their jaws, it was dinner. That included primates, antelope, buffalo, and yes, potentially even small elephants and rhinos. You didn't have to be weak or wounded to end up in their jaws, you just had to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It makes you think how many of our ancient ancestors disappeared without a trace, never honored in burial, never fossilized, never remembered, simply devoured. The only relief, if you can call it that, lies in the fact that their geographical range may have been limited. Fossil evidence suggests that both Thorbjarnasoni and Anthropophagus were restricted to small regions in Africa, particularly around deep, freshwater lakes. This wasn't global horror, it was local apocalypse. But it's possible their size came with a cost. Larger bodies meant greater risk of overheating, forcing them to stay near deep, cool waters. And while modern crocodiles thrive in swamps, rivers, and estuaries across continents, these giants may have been trapped by their own bulk, unable to migrate or adapt quickly to changing environments. Which brings us to one last haunting chapter: their extinction. By around 1.8 million years ago, both monsters vanished from the fossil record. Not gradually, just gone. Paleontologists believe that the very traits that made them terrifying may have also doomed them. Huge body size, low mobility, limited habitat range. These things don't work well during periods of climate instability. And the Pliocene-Pleistocene transition was nothing if not chaotic. Rapid changes in rainfall, droughts, food shortages. While smaller crocodiles adapted, survived, and evolved, the giants faded out. But here's the dark irony. They didn't go down in a blaze of epic battles or slow decline due to stronger predators. No, their biggest competition came from within their own kind. In many of the regions where they once ruled, multiple crocodile species coexisted. Some were smaller, nimbler, more efficient. Others, like the Nile crocodile, still remain in those same waters today. Up to 12. 0 of them now thrive in places like Lake Tana. And that's a chilling thought. Because even though the giants are gone, their cousins inherited their throne and the waters are still ruled by cold-blooded kings. It's worth noting one last contender in this prehistoric arms race: Euthecodon. This now extinct genus may have been just as long. Some estimates go up to 28 feet, but there's a catch. Its jaws were long and narrow, suited for catching fish, not mammals. Its teeth were pointed and uniform, like modern gharials. In other words, while it looked terrifying, it may not have been built to hunt humans. But would you really want to bet your life on that theory if you saw one rise out of the water? Even though Euthecodon didn't survive to the modern age, its presence proves just how diverse and competitive the ancient crocodilian world really was. And yet, only the most efficient killers endured. The modern crocodiles that now populate rivers and lakes across Africa and Asia may be smaller, but they're no less deadly. And they still carry the legacy, the hunting strategies, the armor-plated skin, the ambush tactics that once made their ancestors the stuff of primal terror. So the next time you see a crocodile, whether on a nature channel or behind thick glass at a zoo, remember this: that's not a relic, that's a survivor, a living weapon honed over tens of millions of years. And somewhere in its bloodline, maybe just a few genetic whispers away, is the memory of giants. The ones that didn't just survive with us, they hunted us. And that haunting tension between predator and prey, between us and them, still exists. It lives on in the shadows of muddy rivers, in the stillness of lake banks, in the flicker of amber eyes just beneath the surface. It's part of our history, it's part of their design. If this tale of ancient terror made your heart race, imagine what else the prehistoric world has waiting in its depths. Subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals, and together we'll keep diving back into the forgotten darkness of time where survival wasn't guaranteed and monsters weren't make-believe.